All right. I'm going to share the results here. Let's see, 60% by age categories, followed by housing condition and land use.
Might just make this is Ken Wall with Geodata Services, make a brief comment. We do have a lot of demographic data, which would include population and age categories that's already been processed. And we have both through the Vibrant Future site as well as through the CEIC, Department of Commerce. There's pretty good information on age and population, particularly when you're looking at it at the region or the county level. One word of caution on that is the last census, the government changed the way they did the age information and the other demographic data and economic data in the census. It's part of the American Community Survey. And so when you get down to a sub-county level, particularly below like in a small town, you want to be a little bit cautious of the data due to the lowest sampling size.
Okay, Ken, and I think you're up to talk to us about the interactive mapping portion.
Okay. So I'm Ken Wall. I've already piped in a couple times. I'm with Geodata Services, and I'm the GIS, Geographic Information System, and I've been working with the project since the first year of the process. So I'm going to talk about the interactive maps. My guess is that the vast majority of you are probably fine with just downloading a PDF map that someone else creates, and Michael's done a great job of creating a set of maps that are primarily targeted at the local governments and tribal governments for planning purposes. The maps we've created so far are based on Montana statute, that maps that are suggested and required for growth plans and for grant writing applications, but there's many more that can be created. We have literally hundreds of layers that have been developed for this process. And we're going to show you some other locations on where you can go to get that information and get further information beyond even the tools we're showing today are useful for more than just Vibrant Futures data, but can apply to others as well, including your own personal work at your business, as well as your ranch, as well as in various fields such as health and economic development.
Hey, Ken, I'm going to interject for just a moment here. If you have questions at any time, feel free to type them in the chat box, monitoring that, and we'll stop and answer questions at any time. So, like I said, if you need to ask a question, you'll just type it in the chat box, and we'll read it off to the presenter and get it answered for you. Okay, thanks, Ken.
So before we jump into this section, there'll be three sections to this. We'll be looking at the interactive map browser that we recommend, and then we'll look at these studies, some real-world situations that have been asked of Vibrant Futures, show you how you might do some analysis with the maps, and then lastly we'll talk about the community maps and how we're gathering input to improve the data as we go. Before we do that, we're going to jump to another poll, and the initial poll on how you've used interactive maps, we can get a sense of the experience of the crowd. So Erin, if you would kick that one off, and we'll have a few minutes for people to fill this one out. So here we're talking about the maps that are interactive on your computer or your smartphone or your tablet, not the paper maps or the canned PDFs that were developed.
Okay, so we've got 15 people that have voted to this point, so I'll keep it over just for a few more seconds.
Probably good, Aaron.
Well, there's a few that haven't quite completed it yet. We've got 17 people that are voting, but only 14 have finished. So I'll give you just a couple more seconds here to finish up that survey. Okay, so I'm going to end the voting and share the results. And if you want to talk about votes here.
Sure. So we have a vast majority, 70% almost, that use the web browser versus a dedicated program, and a small percentage that don't use maps on their computer. By far, the majority is typical is a Windows computer. Access these. Second is the smartphone. You can access these maps via any of these devices. And what we're going to show you is the free software. There is commercial software for more advanced desktops. Some of you in local government tribes or large corporate entities do have access to the commercial supplement. Whoops. See what happened anyway. Disappearing on my screen. So in terms of the apologize, I'm not sure why it keeps disappearing, but let's go ahead and move on to the next item. The data sources, you all would have received a handout of those, and those are quite important to understand both the metadata and documentation about the data, how we got it, where it came from. It came from a variety of sources. We don't have time in the webinar to get into a lot of detail on those, but we'd be happy to answer questions at the end if you have any on those data sources. Secondly, there's a list of some, which I'll have a slide in a minute, of some external websites, mostly oriented around the state. These are sort of pick lists of my favorite interactive web maps. Some of these don't always work on a smartphone. The tools we're going to show you to access the Vibrant Futures do work on any device, and they don't require any kind of add-ons to your browser. But be aware that some of the interactive websites out there at the state do require a personal computer or a Windows-based computer web browser. Generally, they'll work with different browsers, but browsers do have different characteristics. You use Chrome, Firefox, and try to avoid Internet Explorer, but a lot of people, that's their favorite browser. So there's also a list of attributes. One of the key layers that we developed is the township layer. And most of you know this project was regional in scope. We were looking at the entire region, 11 counties, 4 tribal nations. And so we settled on the township as the unit of analysis rather than going down to the project level, because this project was not intended to be done to look at siting on an individual corner in Havre, for instance. It was looked at the region as a whole. And so a township is a 36 square mile unit made up of the public land survey system. It allows us to summarize data. We have over 300 attributes in that layer. And in your handout, that's the key when you get into using the map behind the scenes and doing some analysis, as you'll see in examples in a bit. We use, because of the database requires rather small cryptic names, there's small names that represent the 300 plus columns of data that are in this township layer. Some of them are obvious, like population or median household income. Others are a little harder to figure out, so use that handout as a key to understanding what layer you're looking at. And lastly, we're just focusing on a sample of state and federal sources. There are many, many out there. This tool is really your map window to the world, and there's a lot of data out there that you can gather and do your own mashups without being a programmer and mash your data up with others' information. This is the list of interactive maps. I'm not going to dwell on this in any great length, but I do urge you to take a look at some of these. So all of these are a little more on the complicated end. One of the caveats for working with web maps is many times, especially those developed by the state, are developed by GIS nerds like myself. And often GIS people make their maps look like what their desktops look like, rather than what everybody else likes to see them. We've gone the route with Vibrant Futures of kind of building maps for the Facebook generation, which means we present one layer per map. We don't try to bring up a very complex mapping interface with layer controls and all kinds of bells and whistles and gadgets and doohickeys and such, which confuse you when you're a beginning or a very light user of maps. So we try to err on the simple end of things. So some of these do take some experience, but they're quite useful. And they all serve different purposes, whether you're looking at parcels, you're using the Montana Site Selector for economic development and realty, whether you're looking at Fish, Wildlife, and Parks data. Almost everybody has probably used this one right here, the road report. Not very active this time of year, but come winter, that's how people go in and check the conditions on the road. That's actually an open source map. Most of these are built on the ESRI, which stands for Environmental Systems Research Institute, the company that makes the software that we partner with and that almost every county uses and that the state and federal government uses. So a variety of sites on here. This particular one from DEQ is where we got the gravel data, for instance. So all these are interactive. They work on your web browser. They allow you to zoom in and out at different scales and use the mapping system. These will supplement what we've done with Vibrant Futures. So next we're going to look at a short little video, and I'll go ahead and start this up, Aaron. And this is an introduction to ArcGIS. Yeah, about a 2-minute video.
Do you ever feel as though your map data isn't working for you? You're collecting it and collecting it, but you can't share it. That's how Dan used to feel before he discovered ArcGIS. ArcGIS is a turnkey solution to create and share interactive maps, built to work the way you work, with nothing to install or set up, so you can be productive on day one. Like Dan, you just sign in and get instant access to ready-to-use maps and apps. Or create new maps, transforming your data into content-rich maps that tell your story. You can even make mashups with data and maps shared by others, and add pop-ups to your maps highlighting charts, photos, and web pages. What about using Microsoft Excel to make maps? No problem. You can add any map you create in Excel as a slide in your next PowerPoint presentation. Want to share all this? With ArcGIS, it's easy. Dan and Maria can share maps and data in the office, and with Noah working in the field. And everyone using ArcGIS can share their maps on blogs, websites, Twitter, and Facebook. Even your developers can get in on the action, so Hiromi can build custom apps using Esri's cloud-based services, develop in the API of her choice, and deploy on any device. Suddenly, everyone in your organization is able to access their data from anywhere, anytime, using their tablets, smartphones, and browsers. You can also use ArcGIS as a pure cloud-based solution, or combine it with your own infrastructure for a hybrid solution. And it all works with your existing investment in GIS. Unleash your potential. See what happens when you unlock the power of where.
Okay, that's a brief introduction to the system, and we're going to look next at some dynamic maps, and I'm going to show you a simple way to view the maps. This is what you typically see embedded in your website. If you do access a tablet or a PC, there are dedicated applications that work with ArcGIS.com, and you can download those for free from the iTunes Store, or from the Android or the Google Play Store. You can also access these on your browser like you would on your computer or your tablet. So we start with this very simple map. We do include a couple of bells and whistles on here. We have a legend up here at the top that you can look at when there's colors on the map. You can look at what those mean. We have a base map. There are 6 to 8 world-class base maps worldwide, so you can actually use this free of charge to make your own hiking maps or hunting maps or backyard farm plan. So basically, you can use this in a variety of ways. Down here at the bottom, there is a very important button that allows you to view larger maps so you can do more. So I'm going to show a quick, and I'm going to talk over this one, so I'm going to show you a quick video of how this works. So let me start that up. So we have very basic zoom control on this. You can click on that, or you can use your mouse wheel on, if you have a wheel on your mouse, you can scroll it forward to zoom in and scroll it backwards to zoom out. You can also hold your left mouse button down and pan the map. Here we're looking at some neighborhoods over a topographic map. And if you click on any attribute, polygon, point, or line on the map, it'll give you some background information for the data that's tied to that map. Remember that the maps are the where, but they also often have the what embedded in them in terms of the database that's tied to the map information. That's what you do your analysis with. In this case, we're looking at the property values from the Montana parcel map for this given area. These base maps are nice. They allow you to switch between a topographic map and image map. So you can zoom from literally the world down to your backyard. You can't quite read license plates with these, but you can get down fine enough to see individual features on the ground, things bigger than roughly the size of a coffee table. So very detailed, and that's worldwide. You have a street map, which is very accurate. These are done with cartographic quality. Another one is a National Geographic base map, if you want your maps to look like National Geographic. Again, these are free to use. You can make any one the backdrop. You have to be, of course, connected to the internet to use this. And then optionally, you can click View Larger Map if that's what you need to do. If all you need to do is do a quick look at the map, then you're fine to go just as you are. But if you want to be able to look in more detail, then View Larger Map is the key to going and looking in more detail. So before I get into a quick demonstration of it, give you some of the rationale on why we chose this particular tool as the one we're showing today and the one we recommend everybody starts with. Number one, it's simple. It doesn't cost you anything. It's free, and very little or no experience is necessary. There is an organizational subscription that you can buy with this. We hope to build capacity later to assist local governments. It's very affordable. That way you can share your own maps, create your own. But for now, you can use them, and it's free to use. And this will allow you to access data throughout the world, not just for Vibrant Futures. This is a software program written by Esri and provided for free to the public. Nonprofits can actually get a discount on the subscription if they wish to. You don't have to purchase the subscription as well to use it. It works on all platforms, as I mentioned. So it'll work on an iPad, iPhone, Chrome tablet, Nexus tablet, PC, Macintosh, etc. No browsers needed. No add-ons needed to your browser. So it's very simple and easy. You just open a web browser and access it from anywhere in the world, including public libraries, for instance. You can choose different base maps and use those, so you can switch the base that you're using. You can print out of these. You can query information. And you can turn layers on and off. You can get under the hood, which we're going to do a little bit today, and show you the basics of how to at least do some basic analysis. There are more powerful tools out there, even from Esri, that are free, but this is the one we recommend you start with. The one I really highly recommend, if you do get a subscription, is to use the Excel version, if you decide to do that. That way your maps are actually embedded in Microsoft Excel, and you have an extra tab for those maps to access the data. It's important to realize that you can leverage state data, federal data, and national data in combination with your maps that are on here. You're not just limited to what you see from what we provided through Vibrant Futures. I'm not going to dwell on this a lot, but this is the viewer that we're recommending, the ArcGIS.com map viewer. The reason is this is one page of about 10 pages of columns of information and what it does. We're not going to cover those in detail, but the important thing to realize is that the checkboxes, this particular viewer has all the features that some of the others are more selective on. This is the one that costs dollars over here. This is ArcGIS Desktop. Some of you in tribal government or county government already have a copy of that. It's about I think a $1,500 package commercial. That allows you to publish things in the others, but this is the commercial software. Also recommend later sometimes take a look at this, ArcGIS Explorer Desktop. It's a little more full-featured than the basic browser, but we're sticking with the most simple thing today that's usable anywhere by anyone for free. Okay, I'm going to do a quick YouTube video here of Paul Wick from Teton County, who graciously provided a little testimonial on how he's used it from a local government perspective. Then I'm going to give you a demonstration of the basic browser. Then we'll get into some actual examples. So.
Okay. Well, I think the importance of maps, at least from my perspective, is I really enjoy the snapshot, quick and a lot of information without having to go through pages and pages and pages. So I think the value of maps is that quick access to a lot of information. One of the tough things, at least coming from a smaller community, small county, is keeping those maps current and then making sure that it's accurate information that you're portraying on the maps. And having been involved in some map making, I know the long process it involves in terms of making a map that's going to be of some long-term value. So, and that's something that when you have limited resources, a lot of times you just, either the time or the information gathering, all those things take a lot away from the resource. So, you know, a group effort, a regional approach, I think is a great approach to things. I know that my county commissioners have to make a lot of decisions, and they really want it in a snapshot. Here's the information, and make the decision. So they certainly do make a lot of use of maps. A lot of the maps that they use are very old maps, unfortunately, and sometimes therefore aren't an accurate representation of the way things are today. So, you know, trying to keep them updated, and again, you know, in a small community, we don't necessarily have the resources to be, you know, every 6 months or a year or whatever it should be, trying to keep all that information current.
So Paul is, his position, I guess Paul's not typical, but his position is typical of many local government officials in this region, in the rural parts of Montana. Wears a lot of hats. He's the weed coordinator and other duties as assigned, in addition to being the planner in Teton County. And I appreciate his perspective. He also mentioned that the commissioners and others use maps regularly, and it's very important to think about that local input into that process, and particularly clarifying and looking at that data. Okay, I'm going to share my desktop for a moment, and I'm going to give you a demonstration of the process. So when we we're actually looking at this on our site, mapcoop.com. But you can access these maps off of the Vibrant Futures website and off the same maps button that the paper maps are available. We typically show them in a form like this first, where we have a list of the types of maps. Usually I put several of these on one page just for this presentation today, but usually they're on an individual page by themselves with one layer for each. So let's look at this particular map here, which is energy expenditures. You'll see as I zoom my map in and out using my mouse wheel that this is a dynamic map, even though it's embedded in my website or in my web browser. As I click on a particular township, in this case, these are these 36 square mile townships, then I see information about the expenditures for energy for the averages for that township. So these are the average energy expenditure is about $2,400 in that township, just north of Fort Benton, the one that Fort Benton's in. And then it breaks it down by the type of fuel oil, electricity, etc. Some of the maps at the bottom have a bar chart, some don't, depending on the nature of the data. That gives you an alternative way to view the information. In most cases, in this case, surprisingly, actually electricity is the highest. Usually it's fuel oil in this part of
Hey, Ken.
Yeah.
Can you make your screen just a little bit larger? I'm having trouble seeing it here on my thing.
Yeah, I will in just a moment.
Okay.
So this little map window allows you to do those basics. It also allows you to switch your base map if you wish to, and look at the imagery underneath, which is a little hard to see on this map. But you're limited to those functions. So most often what you want to do is view larger screen. So you go down below the map, click view larger map, and then it's going to open up in a new window with a much larger map and a little bit more functionality. So this is the ArcGIS.com view. This is out-of-the-box software. I haven't modified this in any way. I didn't have to hire a programmer or a consultant to show me how to use it. It's basically the basic information that's available and the basic way that you can consume and use the information. Notice when I click that, now it's filling up my entire screen. And the base map button has moved over here to the left, but I can still look at all of the base map that I wish to. If I want to switch to a National Geographic style background, I can do that. And the base maps do change as I zoom in. I'm going to turn off the colored map for just a moment, and let's zoom in to Havre here, center it on my screen, scroll my mouse down. As I zoom in, it gets more and more detail. As I go right into Havre, the map changes in detail. So it's much like Google Maps. I've got a variety of base maps that I can look at. I can look at it with imagery, and I can, again, zoom down. It takes a moment for it to get clear as you zoom in, but you can see it's quite detailed in terms of the ability to work with the map. I can pan the map by holding my mouse down and dragging it left, right, up, or down, and I can do a variety of other things. I'm not going to cover a lot of this today, but there are abilities to do measurements on here. I can measure the length of a line or the area of a field or the area of any polygon I wish to draw. I can also work with GPS data and load data from my GPS or enter coordinates in latitude, longitude to get the coordinate on the ground. So there are some basic tools to use in here. You can also print your map at any point. I'll come back to that in a moment. Over on the left, you'll see that you've got 3 buttons here in your table of contents. One is About, and that just gives you some basic documentation about the map and some help. The one on the right is Legend. That's an important one just to show the layer information that's currently visible. Notice right now it only shows a couple of things that I'm zoomed in so far. It's hard to see those. So I'm going to switch back to Street Map. So it's only showing just the town polygon, and this is represented by a square because Havre is a regional hub. If I go back to my content button and turn back on the township layer, when I go to Legend, I'll see the information that's associated with that layer because I made it visible. So this is more of a GIS thing. We kind of hide it from you initially, but I do recommend using this middle button. This is really the key to getting to more of the intermediate functionality and the ability to now analyze the map is through the content button. When you do that, you'll see your layers here, and you can turn them on or off by simply making the checkbox visible. The other thing that you can do is click on the map and get information about it. Again, this is energy expenditures for every given polygon, every given township on the map. There's a few other things that are worth looking at. If I want to set the transparency, for instance, there's a little down triangle next to every layer, and that's really the key to opening up some of these other functions. We're not going to cover all these, but one that you probably want to use quite often is transparency. You set your transparency, and you can go from completely transparent, you can see through it, to opaque, which is completely non-see-through. So you can adjust that depending on the background layer that you have and how much you want to visualize your map in different ways. The other one which is important is the filter, which we'll show you in a little bit. So that's the basic sort of quick overview of the map. If I want to print this map, I zoom to make it fit the screen as I wish, because it's going to print everything that's on the screen. I click the print button, and it's going to create a map of that, which I can right-click and send to my printer, or I can right-click and capture that and put it into a report. So it's always going to show you what's currently on your screen. Okay, so that's the basics of how these maps work. So I'm going to now switch back to the slideshow. And see, I don't think I need to close my, I'm sorry, I do need to stop sharing for a moment. Okay, so let's take a look next at a couple of applications and how these maps might be used. We have a couple of case studies, and these came from questions in the region. The first case study we have is for health services and aging population. We want to look here at where the aging populations are in the region, and by aging we mean those that are over 65 and then those that are over 70. We want to see how those compare to the proximity of hospitals and the capacity of those hospitals in terms of the number of beds they have available. And then we'll look at a similar comparison of assisted living facilities. So this is a health-related example. And I'm going to share my desktop again and bring back up my map. And let's take a look at the aged population next. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. So here we have the townships with the oldest population shown in colors here of brown. I just happened to, the last two maps happen to be shaded in red or brown, but you can make the colors different if you wish. And I've already clicked View Larger Map, so I'm looking at the map in a little more detail. Let's click on one of these. We'll click on Shelby. So Shelby, we have 344 elderly over 70, 130 between 65 and 69. So a total of 474 that are over 65 or greater. And this is the distribution. So we have a little bit larger distribution of 70 plus than we do in their 60s. So that's showing the population of the region. If we wanted to look at this in relation to hospitals, we can add that to the layer. You're not just limited to what's on the web. You can actually add data from a file. And I'm going to choose that one. Sorry, I forgot to put this in the right place, so let me hang on one moment. Looking for a zip file, which I should have handy, I apologize. Michael, by the way, has this data loaded on his on a Dropbox. So if you need the data, if you already have a GIS system, or if you need the data in a format that you can look at yourself with your own GIS, or apologize, I should have had this up. I meant to. I forgot to look. Okay, so I'm going to real quickly do something here so that we can. If I can't find it, I should have had this prepared already, but actually. We come back and do that in just a moment because I forgot to have that layer available for me. But I could bring this up and bring in a new shapefile of hospitals, which I meant to do. It just has to be in a zipped file that is, and Michael has those available for you on Dropbox if you wish to, if you already have a GIS or you want to bring your database up inside of this system. I'll come back and demo that at the end and look at it while there's a question and answer period. But then the second thing I wanted to show you is to be able to do a filter of this data. So in this case, we're looking at the table that's attached to it. And then before I actually do that, we look at a button that I didn't show you before. But down here, partway down, is the thing that says Show Table. When you do that, it's going to bring up your database attributes at the bottom. Let me maximize the screen here. And so this is all of the information that's associated with this particular query. So it's the populations by township in a table. So let's filter that information and take a look at a couple of queries with it. We go to filter, and let's look at the number of people 70 or older have to be at least one of those in a township. And let's look at the ones that have at least 10 population and have at least 10 beds and at least 5 assisted living beds in that township. We'll apply that filter. Now we see a fewer number. If we were to filter it, remember that Great Falls is a part of this and this big, large population area in the region. So if we were to say, let's look at where there's more than 500 elderly population over 70 with at least 10 beds and 5 assisted living beds, what's going to happen? It's going to narrow it down to just a few places that have the larger number. If you get much over, so you have to understand a little bit about your data so that you know that Great Falls obviously is the largest population center, is going to dominate it in some cases. So that's one way that you can narrow this down and add additional information to your map. I apologize for not in the shapefile. I'll come back to that in a moment when I have a chance to look on my hard drive and figure out where I left it. Back to stopping sharing for a moment, and we'll look at case study number 2. So in that example, we're looking at where are the elderly in relation to the hospital beds and the aging population. Okay. Second example, or the second case study, is economic development. Here we're looking at business broadband infrastructure and the workforce and the potential for telemedicine. So the questions that you might ask on this are, how available is broadband internet in the region, and where are the areas where you have high-speed broadband suitable for business or for telemedicine, and then how do these compare with the availability of health service and health workers? This is actually an example that Senator Tester's office requested of Vibrant Futures, and Michael prepared a map for them. So this is, again, a real-world example that the senator was interested in, the senator's staff, in terms of potential for broadband and telemedicine in the region. We're going to go back to sharing a desktop, and we'll look at another map. Okay, so in this case, the broadband comes from the National Broadband Map. And we've got a slightly different shade of hue for this, of purple colors, to maximize this. This is updated twice a year, and you have several excellent internet providers in your region. Again, let's go right to filtering on this one and take a look at the data. We have it set now for structures that at least have access to one high-speed internet and that have at least one healthcare worker. Let's make that 0 for a minute just to get a better look at. We want to eliminate the number of employees as part of our filter and just look at the internet capability first. So this is showing shades of blue. You can always turn on your legend to see what the legend means. So the lightest blue means that there's at least one household that has high-speed internet. And by high-speed here, we're defining that as 6 megabits per second or greater, sort of a business class internet, low level for being able to do telemedicine. So the darker the blue mean that there's more population or more households that fall within the area that the providers, such as Triangle and Three Rivers and CenturyLink and Opticom or Bresnan or Charter now it's called, provide services in the region. So the purple ones are the ones that have the larger population, but everything in blue here has at least one household that can access high-speed internet. We also have mapped all internet as well as mobile wireless, but this is an example looking at telemedicine, so we're sticking with the higher speeds. So let's go back and look at filtering this again, and now we want to look at a combination of, let's look at where there's at least 10 households that have high-speed internet and areas where there are 5 or more employees in healthcare that might want to either be the provider of telemedicine or the user of telemedicine. So you can see that there are a number of smaller communities that do meet those criteria. Whenever we do a filter like that, we're matching all of the criteria. In this case, at least 10 households that have high-speed internet, at least 5 healthcare workers. That might be a doctor, a nurse, a dentist, a social worker for mental health, etc. So that's an example of how you might filter your map and look at areas that have high-speed broadband and also might be opportunities for telemedicine. So again, I'm using the simple map. I can zoom in and look at this in more detail, as well as bring in other layers on top of it. I'm not just limited to layers that are available from the Vibrant Futures. I can actually add some other content as well. Let's do that. Let's search for layers. And let's, instead of my organization here, we're going to go to the entire ArcGIS Online library. And let's look up the keyword health. And we find a lot of layers that have been published. These come from various sources. And they all have the keyword health somewhere in their tags. So you can see that there's a lot of data out there in the world that is accessible. Some of it is only for certain regions and others. Let's look at one like USA HHS diabetes. We'll just add that to our map. So now we're doing a mashup. We're taking data from another source and adding it to our map. So we're done adding layers. Let's say add that one. Now it added this additional layer to our map. If we wanted to, this is diabetes by county and diabetes by state. We click on one of those polygons, we get the information about that, and can compare diabetes rates. In this case, they've got a pie chart. So this data came from Health and Human Services. You can click on it and find out more about the documentation. I haven't actually seen this layer before. I just grabbed it off of a query. So I've essentially combined my layers with other layers out there, in this case a national layer of diabetes from Health and Human Services. So you can see the ability to leverage this much beyond your information and bring other data in. I can turn that layer back off and I'm back to just looking at the layers that I have. All this is exposed. Initially it's hidden from you so that you don't get intimidated, but clicking the content button, you can begin to mix and match the information and do what's called mashups, of taking one map and laying it down, laying another one over top of it. And that could be from the state, from the federal government, from a university, from another non-governmental organization, a variety of sources. So you're not just limited, although we have an incredibly, very good data set for you, you're not just limited to that. Okay, I'm going to go back and stop sharing, go back to the PowerPoint for just a moment, and we'll look at the third case study. Before we do that, we've got a little bit of a testimonial here, or an example from Sheila Rice, the Executive Director of NeighborWorks, and I'll play this little video so she can talk about her use of maps for housing in the region.
Information that Opportunity Link has provided. The mapping is really helpful, I think, because when we're writing grants, we're always looking for what's the competitive edge. How can we make our grant look like it's more worthy of funding than any other grant? It's all competitive. And we find that if we are able to add the visuals of a map, especially something that would be able to break down overcrowding or the need for rentals, or the age of people that are living in rentals, all of those things, many nuances, can really be helpful depending on what grant application we're working on. And then beyond that, I think it's just really important in the future to just know better. It's like, where are the needs? What can we do? What area is going to need more help than others? And I think we can do some things that would help us avoid what happened in eastern Montana in the oil and gas development areas, where really the need for housing got way ahead of all of the planners. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks to Sheila for her examples on how she uses this data for grant writing and other applications for housing. I'm going to go back to sharing my desktop again, and we'll, I'm sorry, let me go to the example first, and then I'll share my desktop. We're looking here at the third example, which is a housing example. And here we're looking at case study number 3, weatherization grants. We want to look at prioritizing housing energy conservation grants and technical support and education in the areas where there's the most need, where there's the most social inequities or poverty in the region. So I want to look at where the largest proportion of low-income families are and households in the region based on the HUD criteria for median household income levels. So these are set national and state levels that are adjusted by family size. They're actually set individually for each state, adjusted to the median household income of the state. So the smaller the family, the smaller the percentage criteria, and vice versa. So how do you, secondly, how do energy expenditures compare to the age of housing in the region? And where are the homes older than 1970 that are most likely the candidates for weatherization improvements? We have in Montana a parcel map that is statewide. We have among the best data actually in Montana in the West. And one value of that is having the parcel map done consistently throughout the state from property tax information. That gives us a wealth of information, not just about property taxes, but also about the assessed values of property and land. And one of the criteria on there that I don't list in this example, but we do have the housing condition, for instance. So we can not, and in fact, if you want to dig deep, you can actually look at what type of insulation is in the attic versus the basement. So there's a lot of ways that you can strategically look at housing and a weatherization and optimize where that might occur. So I'm going to share my desktop again and bring up the map. And during that break, I found actually how to bring in I found my shapefile. So let me show you that real quick before I leave this. Here we're looking at broadband, but let's say we also wanted to look at this in relation to the hospitals providing services broadband to the region. So let's go ahead and go back and add a layer from file. So before we added a layer from the web from ArcGIS Online and found that NHS data, now we're going to load a layer that locally is sitting on my hard drive. And and as I mentioned, Michael has these available for you. He has many layers that have already been zipped up ready for you in this process. So the data looks like this. A shapefile, I don't want to get too technical here, but a lot of people think I've heard of a shapefile, which is an Esri map layer, and it's really made up of, sorry, I need to go back and choose that again. It's really made up of several files, and they are zipped up, in this case, into a zip. So I'm going to look at the doctors. Actually, I'm going to switch that and look at hospitals. I'm going to open up the hospitals and bring those into the map. Now, they don't show up too well on here. They're those little red spots. They don't show up very well. They do have information about the hospital, and this comes from the Department of Health and Human Services. This is the registered list from DPHHS of all the registered hospitals in the region. That's where the information on number of beds. So it's an authenticated list, authoritative list. Let's make that look a little bit more like a map that you'd want to print. So again, let's go back to the down arrow, click the middle button for content, go to the down triangle next to hospitals, and let's change the symbols for this layer. And we want it still to be a single symbol, and let's change the symbol to be safety and health. Give some examples there, and those are going to come up in just a moment. And we can pick one that looks more like a hospital that you would place on the map. Sorry, it's taking a bit. Let me go back to basic. See if we can find something there. Maybe it'll go this time. There we go. So now we've got some symbols that look a little bit more. Let's pick this one for hospitals and apply it. And let's make the sizes a little bigger so we can see these better on this particular map. So we'll make them 32 pixels. Apply that and we're done. So now we've got hospitals marked on the map in relation to our polygons. And we might want to go back. If we're interested in different types of hospitals, we could actually select those that are critical access separate from the others. I won't do that at this point. So we're happy with that, and we might want to just go back and just look at the broadband one last time and filter it without the healthcare folks. and look at where all the broadband is, at least one person with high speed in relation to the hospitals. So you can see these are the areas where there's a lot of areas that are populated that don't have high-speed broadband, such as the Blackfeet Reservation. There's a little bit in Browning, but so there are areas where you wouldn't be able to do telemedicine to the home, but the areas in blue are the areas where you could. Okay, so the last example is housing. So let's take a look at that one, which I believe we'll take a look here. So this is the HUD criteria for median household income. And here we're looking at the poorest of the poor, those that make 30% of the median household income. Let's look at the highest ones of those, which we're looking at now, with at least 20% making only 30% of the HUD income, and at least one house built before 1970. So these are the poorest of the poor regions. In brown, those are where those occur. So these are the very poor, making 30% or less of the median household income. So if we wanted to design a program where there's at least 10 houses, if we make that too high, we're going to exclude some of the rural areas. So let's look at the areas in the most need with at least 10 houses built before 1970. So you can see that, in fact, if we want to go to the most need, the highest of the very poor is 34%. Let's bump this up to 30% or greater. That's a little too high because that was very rural areas. So that's, if you were going to, pick highest priority of the most poor that have some houses built before 1970, you'd be doing it up on the Blackfoot Reservation. Realistically, if you wanted to look at, say, instead of just the most poor, let's look at the medium level. This is folks that have 50% of the median household income, at least 10 of those, and at least 10 houses built before 1970. And you can see that broadens the pool out a bit to areas where you might apply those grants to assist with the different levels of poverty. So you can combine those in different ways. The highest level of HUD is 80% of household. That can range up to 76% of the township. That is 80% or less in the poor range. So that's an example of how to look at housing filtered by comparing household income to the houses built before 1970, which are the most likely candidates for weatherization and also the most likely to have lead in the paint. So those are some additional examples. I'm going to stop sharing now and go back to the PowerPoint for the final section, which is community maps. We're on schedule here, by the way, so once we finish this section and do our wrap-up, we'll have plenty of time for some question and answer at the end of the session. So as Paul Wick mentioned in his discussion earlier about how he uses it with limited resources, how he uses maps with limited resources in a rural county, Teton County in this case, we have a lot of information stored in the region that is in the minds of the folks that live there, and their knowledge of their place, it vastly outweighs what is known from the outside. So we've tried to leverage that as much as possible, and we're continuing to do that. So it's an ongoing effort. On the Vibrant Futures website, we have 5 main maps right now that are still open for public input, and we'll be putting up some more. One that we're interested in doing in the near future is to identify stories about catalytic projects, success stories in the region. And those will be built by you, by the community, and could be anything from a new coffee shop or a new a daycare center to other larger efforts region-wide. The ones we have now are targeting some of the data that we felt was not adequate enough from state, federal, or local government sources. And one of those was in the health field, and that was recreation and fitness. So this is an example of a map. And I'm going to show you several examples, then I'll go in and actually demonstrate one of these. So here we wanted parks and bike trails and fitness centers You know, for example, sticking with Teton County for a minute at Choteau, if you've been to Choteau or you've lived there, you probably know that the Stagecoach Inn provides aquasize in the hotel for local community member classes. And that's probably common in a lot of other communities. So we have mapped all the fitness centers, and we've mapped the parks that we know about, and the walking trails and bike trails, but we don't have all of them by any means. So we use the crowdsourced approach. By crowdsourced, I mean that that the community themselves actually went in and contributed to the map. And we had them map, and we're still doing this, map all the parks in the region. Some of those are on maps, some aren't, so we're using the public to do that. You can also comment on the maps. In this case, we have public and private campgrounds. You might want to add a new favorite fishing access site that is not on here. Maybe you don't want to do that. That's often a secret. But you can add additional recreation facilities, bike trails. And this is a public map. It's open to the public. It's not an official map. For every one of these that we have an editable map, the official map is in the works behind the scenes and is vetted and looked at by people in the region to make sure it's accurate. So this is a draft map that's essentially like someone sending you a map of the recreation sites on paper, you marking it up with a pen and pencil and sending it back to them. We're doing that same thing. We're just using the web and these web maps to do that similar process of gathering information from the community as well as vetting and checking the information from the community. The second one we have up is medical and social and health services. We have a good authoritative list for things like hospitals and assisted living centers that are regulated by the state and require licensing by the Department of Public Health and Human Services. But we don't have all the local government required information that, for instance, that is stored there at Cascade County or any of the other counties. We also don't have, some of the information we have on social services comes from national databases, and that isn't always accurate. So we want you to vet that and to make sure that that data is correct. And so we allow you to basically provide comments on them. Notice with all these that there are some similar symbols with all these. You can put an X on top of an existing feature to tell us that that point is incorrect. You could put a question mark with a comment on top of any feature to call into question the data that's associated with it. Or you can put a plus down anywhere to add new data to the map. So it allows you to do markups collectively. And these are, again, available from any device, any browser. And I'll show you how they work in just a moment, with a real example, or with a live example. Local foods is another one. It also is in the health sort of arena. This is a database that the Department of Agriculture has been putting together. It's a work in progress, and it's showing all the local food producers, value-added food producers, as well as points of consumption, stores that sell fresh produce, farms that have stands that sell anything, you know, from fresh fruit to value-added products like honey. So this is not 100% complete, but it's being built by citizens and through grant work at the Department of Ag. So you can go in and add anything on here from a farmer's market that we've missed to a fruit stand that we might have missed. And again, vet and correct the data if it's incorrect. Good example is we have this data from InfoUSA that we started to populate in addition to what the Department of Ag has. And we were mapping all the grocery stores and supermarkets in the region. We wanted to figure out which ones had fresh produce. Well, on the map was one that was the Trader Joe's. And the people back in wherever the technicians are that developed that national data set had probably been to Trader Joe's in California or New York City and thought it was a grocery store. Well, in Great Falls, it's a saddle shop, so it doesn't sell fresh produce. So we need the local information to correct the data that comes from these national sources and make sure it's the most accurate possible. This also becomes your map when you can start to add local produce on here, and local food sources can help to influence your community and make it more available for others. So it's a way that you as a community can build this map. The last example we have up is water and sewer infrastructure. This one was actually suggested by several of the local governments. It's one of the key issues in the region is how to maintain and sustain water and sewer infrastructure. This data comes from the property tax information. I suspect, I'm not a tax expert, but by looking at the data and the gaps in the data, I'm guessing that some of this is not completely accurate and there's gaps in the mapping. So again, this can be a start for you as a community mapping your public water. Here we're mapping public water above and below ground and public sewer, as well as community water and community sewer. The assessors, again, I might be wrong, but the assessors probably do more work on individual properties and assessing the type of roof and things like that. I think this data is supplied more by local governments. But so anyway, this is a water and sewer infrastructure, and it's something that you can probably do some improvements on. Again, it's a layer that you can add to if you wish to. So let me give you an example of one of those, and then we'll close out with our final wrap-up and resources and then open it up for questions. So I'm going to share my screen again for a moment. This will be the last time. And I'm going to, actually going to go back to the recreation map, this one. Okay, so this is an example. This is the recreation map that you can get to off the Vibrant Futures website that we're continuing to try to improve as we go. When we have the we have the street maps turned on, which if we zoom into Great Falls, has some of the parks already identified on it. Some of them weren't identified as parks, like this one right over here. So that's not too bad. And if you go to Google, you can get the bikeways and the parks in some of the bigger towns. But Google doesn't have parks, and really no one does in a lot of these smaller towns. So we've actually had citizens go in and start to basically add to those maps. Let's go and see it. I think in Fort Benton here, let's see what someone has done. So this is citizen efforts at mapping the parks. In this case, they are both were actually on the map. Let's go out and go back over, since Paul was on earlier, we'll go over to Shoto and take a look at his country here. Actually, I'm zooming around to get there, but there's a quicker way to do it. I can go up to this find address and type in Shoto, Montana, hit enter, and it's going to zoom me right to Shoto. Very quick way to do it. Okay, so here we've got a couple of things. We've got the country club and the city park. Switch the base map so we can look at the imagery instead of an imagery with labels, so we don't lose our labels. And we noticed down here that someone put a couple of points on for the tennis court and the swimming pool in Shoto. So if we click on those, oh, that was me that did that. So I mapped the tennis court the other day and the swimming pool. So this is basically an editable map. If there's something else on here that I might miss, I don't know. Let's just, for instance, say I don't think many people recreate in the courthouse lawn, but let's go ahead and add a point for that. So if you want to add and call the courthouse lawn a recreation site, you click Edit, and that activates the Edit button, and you can either question mark one of them, or you can say one of the points should be deleted, or you can add a new point or a new polygon. Let's draw a polygon for this one. So I click with my mouse and click again and draw a little polygon around the courthouse here. Folks in Shoto would probably disagree with me calling that a park, but so we'll call this the courthouse lawn, and I put in my name since I'm the one that created this. We ask you to put your name in case we have questions. If there happened to be a website about this site, I could go in and type in Teton County website. That would show up when you click on it, and I can type a comment on it. And so then I can close that, and now that becomes a polygon on the map. Someone else may later come in and say, you know, I don't necessarily agree with that being a park, so they might want to click on here and say, Jane Doe says, can't type very well, you are crazy, that's not a park. So basically, we are, you can also delete a point. So basically, we're asking you to provide input into this process and vet the existing information by clicking on the data and making sure that it's correct and adding to it. We'd like to get a complete set of all the parks and bikeways and other recreation facilities in the region. It is one of the goals of the project. Very important to bringing back young folks to live in the communities and for a variety of reasons. So that's it in terms of the demonstrations. I'm going to stop sharing and go back and we'll close this out. So in terms of wrap-up, there are online resources which you can go to get further training information. You can get to that off of the Vibrant Futures website. You can go to the Esri Center. These were in your handout that you received yesterday. You can go to the Esri Center. There's about 40 videos there that you can do self-learning in terms of how to use ArcGIS Online. CEIC, Department of Commerce, has a good site with some videos. Our site, Map Co-op, has some additional videos, and you can learn more about it through that. We'll be doing additional trainings in the future as well. So let's take a evaluation. Actually, I think we had one more survey, as I recall. Erin?
Hey, Ken, we do have a question from Paul. Paul has asked, is there a helpline once we start using this mapping resource? And he says he's seen the resource list now. I guess, Ken, if you want to address any technical assistance that's available through ArcGIS, and I would say questions about the map that Vibrant Futures is hosting on the website, you would want to contact Michael here at the office. The number here is 265-3699. I'll make sure to put that in the chat window. And Ken, did you want to talk at all about any help that's available from ArcGIS directly?
Sure. Yeah, that previous slide at Esri has a lot of detailed videos. This is the document that you received yesterday. That is a good starting point for reading about, not only the other web services and the training sites which are on here, and you can click on this in the digital version of the document. But also the detailed documentation on where this came from. So in terms of getting assistance, the best is to talk to Michael, and he is, in addition to making the maps, is getting up to speed himself in terms of how to use this ArcGIS viewer. And there's also self-guided training available through Esri. We are hoping to build additional capacity in the region through additional webinars and also through self-help among the users up there. We hope to eventually get a very affordable method here to access this information and leverage it as a local government. And when I first started working with Paul 4 or 5 years ago in Teton County, this stuff wasn't available. You couldn't access the web maps like this. And so it's really been a sea change in terms of this ability. When you look at a lot of these websites, as I mentioned, from the state, you're going to probably be, particularly these sites right here, you're going to be a little bit overwhelmed at first because most of them are built by GIS people, and they don't seem to have enough understanding of how to keep things simple. They try to make it look like their map on their desktop, and it becomes a little bit of a problem. But if you invest some time, you can get comfortable with some of these maps. So calling Michael is the best bet. Talk to me about other grants and opportunities that we can work with. There's a state fund that you can apply for as a local government to get assistance with this. So the nice thing about it, and this is a fine point or a nuance of what I've been talking about, but the reason I like this ArcGIS.com viewer is it's out of the box. You don't have to hire a consultant to begin to use it. It can be used very simply, and you can build your knowledge gradually. But most important, it's supported by the world's leader in GIS. Like Google, Esri is not going anywhere and is available. I've seen many state entities and I've seen local governments. I won't pick on anybody specifically, but a local government, recently in Montana, spent $70,000 in consulting fees to build a map that they could have just as easily done with this system for free. So I urge you, and particularly in the rural areas, learn this tool because you can leverage it for your data and data throughout the world, and you can do it in a very, very affordable way. It's not going to solve all your problems. You do need commercial support with the commercial software, but honestly, we haven't figured out how to do a very good job of making that work in rural counties. You know, you heard what Paul said about, you know, he wears a lot of hats. He doesn't have time to, he probably spends less than 5% of his total work job doing maps. And that's true of many of you in rural Montana. So we have to figure out a way to provide that kind of support, update data over time. And we're still working on ways that can happen. But if more and more people, particularly decision makers, commissioners, public officials, managers, start to use these interactive web maps that are accessible to everybody, that's going to put the demand and make the services more suitable for you and more amenable for you. So we're approaching this from a bottom-up perspective, from a grassroots perspective. So reading this document is number one in terms of how you can help to learn it, and then sitting down and playing with it. And we'll be doing additional webinars as well over time. And I urge you in your, I urge you to go ahead and put into the chat as well additional ideas on what you'd like to see. I believe we do have another survey, if you want to kick that off, Aaron, before we do the final evaluation, that asks folks for what kind of web mapping.
Sorry, I've got the wrong one up here. Let me get the right one up. Okay, everybody should be seeing the evaluation survey on their screen, so if you could take a couple of minutes to fill that out, and then we'll share those results with you.
While you're finishing up on this, a couple of comments reading through the questions. Some people had trouble hearing some of the videos. Reason being that was coming through on the on your computer speakers. When you listen to the review of this or watch the recording, if you want to, you'll should hear the entire videos. But you had to come through on your computer speakers, I think.
Hey, Ken, Paul has asked, is there a floodplain layer for the region?
It's a good question. Generally, no. They haven't. I mean, there are paper maps of the floodplains. They just recently published provisional floodplain maps from, they're called DFIRM, D-F-I-R-M, for the more populated areas in Montana. I know they released them in Missoula County, the Flathead, several places along the Yellowstone where they've been updating those and bringing them into the current mapping world. So the new floodplain maps, the official floodplain maps, are provisional and are only in certain parts of the state. We looked a month or so ago at the national map for DFIRM. You can actually, if you use the ArcGIS Basic Viewer, regardless of what map you're in, if you search on ArcGIS Online for DFIRM floodplain, you'll get an index map of where they've where they've covered those and where they haven't. So the old paper maps are still the official floodplain record as far as I know in this region. There haven't been any new maps updated. The whole country's in the queue for that, and you can imagine that certain areas of the country are getting updated more quickly than others. For example, the New Jersey coast and New York, Long Island, where there's been hurricanes, the South, hurricanes and tornadoes tend to dominate, and flooding. Most people don't realize that I think North Dakota is the highest number of flooding incidents in the country, even more than Florida or some of the hurricane regions. So high priority areas like that for insurance purposes tend to be dominated by hurricanes and tornadoes. Wildfire is a very small fraction of that and doesn't get as much play nationally among insurance folks. So we're kind of low on the totem pole, and the populated areas in Montana are slightly higher and do have some provisional mapping. So you're stuck with paper maps for the most part. The only thing we've done sometimes is put a buffer around streams, which you can do with the GIS, but that's a poor substitute, and it's not an official map. There are a few places that have stream setbacks in Montana, and perhaps others could address the statutes there better than me, but unfortunately that's a layer that is kind of weak in terms of the mapping quality. You want to go ahead and close this out, Aaron?
Okay, so I should be sharing the results at this point. And you want to talk through them?
That's actually a little surprising to me. I would have expected that up to 90% of people would prefer the pre-made PDF maps, so that I guess there's some hope there that folks are interested in the web mapping. Of course, the advantage is you can zoom in and out and make your own maps that way at different scales. So it looks like we got fairly even half the people using the different state sites. Some of those are targeted at better, targeted at a specific site, like, so we also have 77% feel like they have the ability to download the PDF maps. So it looks like Michael's going to be, website's going to be busy getting hit there for data. That's great. And we have 44% feel like they can use the GIS viewer in the basics, and that 77% of you think you have a better understanding of it. You would hope that you wouldn't even have to do a webinar to learn how to use a web mapping tool that's intended for the public. That's the goal, but we're always trying to fight the complexity, the tendency to try to add more bells and whistles to the maps. So when you're talking, if you're in the position of doing a contract for some mapping, make sure you talk to your contractors and say, keep it simple. I don't do this all day like you do, and so I want to be able to understand it down the road. And it looks like 66% are interested in future webinars through Opportunity Link. Okay, so the evaluation, I believe, is the last survey, and which we'll do here in just one moment. And then I think the next webinar is going to be on livability principles. I cut it off, actually. It's Livability Principles Part 1. It's Tuesday, September 24th at 10 a.m. And this webinar will be online. It's been recorded, and I want to thank you for participating. So you want to go ahead and kick off that last evaluation survey to let us know?
No, I think that was the last one there, Ken.
Oh,
it's the one that we just did.
Sorry.
So, no, that's okay.
Let me address
I want to thank everybody for taking the surveys that we've had up today. You know, that really helps us get an idea of where everyone's at kind of in the region and where our focus should be and where we should be headed. So I appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to ask if there are any questions. I'm going to continue to talk here a little bit, but if you do have questions, please type them in the chat window and we'll get them answered. A couple of things that I just wanted to go over again. Those static maps are available on the Vibrant Futures website, which is vibrantfuturesmt.org. We are working on getting the interactive maps up on our VF website. Those should be up here within the next few days. And they will be under the Resources tab, and there will be a tab for static maps and interactive maps. So that's where you can find those items. currently, if you needed to access those maps today, you could visit the Map Co-op website. Let me see here. Just thinking there was a couple more things that I wanted to reiterate.
Let me address Carolyn's question earlier while you're thinking about that, Aaron. She asked about the at Fort Belknap we need, or at least I think she means Fort Belknap versus Fort Benton. We need private land map for landowners. That's actually something I glossed over a little bit, but this data is not just public land. It includes everything. The parcel mapping includes all private parcels and available from the state. We tend to try to, for the regional purposes, we have not mapped the landowner's name, but the state does so, and we've been linking to their data so that it's always up to date as the clerk and recorders do their updates through Department of Revenue. So we actually access the state data as it is. So this is very appropriate for mapping private land. You can the web browsers and the ArcGIS.com viewer is free and open for citizens to use, and you can use it for planning your own farm plan or range plan, or for site location for a business. You can use, for instance, the Montana Site Locator to do a drive time around your business and look at the demographics and analytics for your particular market. If you're starting a new business, you can look at the surplus and the demand in the region. So these tools are available as much for private sector and private landowners as they are for public purposes. There is no public data, and there are no real limits to using it for private land mapping. So, and in fact, the more of that can occur within reason, obviously there's sensitivities in terms of private lands, but the more that we can leverage things like which farmers sell local produce or sell value-added markets, the more that the rest of the community will benefit.
Thanks, Ken. So I don't see any other questions being typed in the chat. The other thing that I wanted to mention, I did post here in the chat window the phone number for Michael, which is 265-3699, or you can contact him via email at mstone@vibrantfuturesmt.org. And I think that's probably all that I have for today, unless there's further questions or Ken or Michael wanted to add any last-minute comments. Okay, well, I thank everybody for participating today, and look forward to having you on the next webinar, which is September 24th at 10 a.m. Have a good one.